Hi, I'm Pam Varner, and in this class we're going to work with the Chains Block C to make a project bag with a clear cover and a zipper on top. So I can open this up and I can put whatever supplies I want in here and I can see what's in the bag. So I've got an 8-inch crosshair square in there, and the template that I'm going to use, there's room for marking pens and other supplies that you may need. And then you're all set and ready to go. For this project, you're going to need a piece of vinyl cut at 10 by 12.5 inches. Leave the paper on the back. So we just want to make sure that that's still on there. Oops. Sometimes it comes off, but that's okay. Just hold on to that tissue. And then I have a sandwich here that I've made out of panel C. And I've cut my backing and my batting at 20 by 16 inches. And there's my backing fabric. So I've made a sandwich there. And then I have two zipper strips that are cut at 2.5 by 12.5 inches. And we're going to fold these in half and press them. And then for your binding, you're going to need 2.25 inch strips. You only need about 68 inches, but I've cut two strips. So you need about a strip and a half if you're cutting with the fabric. Then for my thread, I'm using Glide thread. It's a 40 weight polyester thread. I'm using this in the needle and also in my bobbin. And for my needles, for my ruler work, I'm going to use top stitch needle 80/20. For my construction, since I'm sewing with vinyl, I'm going to use a universal needle. It's also an 80/20. And then I have a zipper that is, you need a 14-inch zipper. This one is considerably longer than 14 inches, but I like the way that it goes with this fabric. So that's the zipper I had. And then I'm using in addition to my ruler foot, I'm using a zipper foot to install the zipper. And then I'm using an edge stitch foot to stitch down the zipper. And then also when I finish with my binding, I'm going to use this as well. So those are those products. And then for the ruler work, we're going to use Spin-E-Fex number 16, a 5.5 inch size. We're going to do this in 16 rotations. And we are going to use, let's see, make sure this is, you can see this. This is our 6-inch square, this section down here. This is the very middle. So this is the very middle of my design, and I'm going to do 16 rotations in all 4 quadrants. Let's go get that done. This is the template we're going to use. It's the 5.5 inch Spin-E-Fex number 16. And your Spin-E-Fex, in addition to having the center reference line up here that we're going to use, you also have these lines, which are even with your needle. And then you have these lines at an angle. We're going to use those to help us line up because you can't see the markings very well on this white fabric. Now, I could have used a washable marker, but I'm just going to use this. So that's how we're going to do it. I'm going to pull my needle up here in the middle, and I can see the middle. It's the intersection of this little block here. Right in the middle of that is where I'm going to pull up my needle. So, and I think I'm going to have to use my flywheel for this. Let's see how good we did. We did good. Okay, so now I'm just going to take a couple of stitches holding my thread taut before I get started. Now, I have my machine set up for ruler work. I have my grid glider down. I have my straight stitch plate on my machine. I have my ruler foot on. I have my feed dogs down, and I've also set my stitch length to 0. I do both 0 stitch length and the feed dogs down. I can't explain why I do that. So the first thing we're going to do is get the foot in here through the little slot, and this is our center. So we're going to start on one of these designs where you can actually see the line, right? So I can take this line up here, the edge here, and I can line it up with my reference line that I've made with 16 crosshairs. So, and we're just going to stitch all the way around. Be really kind of careful here. You can like go off. I like to call those ski jumps. And now we're right back where we started. So I'm going to do these 4 first in the angles. And I'm keeping my thread underneath my template so it kind of stays out of the way. And here we go. And now we're going to go in this direction. And as you can see, my line here is in line with this reference line, right? So if you get off, you can just kind of like make sure that everything's lined up and go on your merry way. This is where I'm going to make sure that my beginning threads are pulled away from the center. And now I'm going to go this direction, lining everything up. And it doesn't matter which way you go around the template, if you go clockwise or counterclockwise. It's just whatever's more comfortable for you. Just watch this little hump right here. Okay, now we've got 4. We have 12 more to go. So now we can go into the lines that are in the middle here in the white and these lines. So I'm going to start on this one because I can see it pretty good from here. And even in the center, I can see it coming out here. It's on the other side that it's kind of not good. So let's start here. We'll go this way, and then we're going to go around counterclockwise. So we've got it here. This makes a really pretty design in the center. Okay, and now we're going to our next reference line, which is right here. And again, I can kind of see this. There's also, for your reference that you can see, is where these intersect right here. And my template is the horizontal line on my template. My needle placement is on that line, so that's kind of helpful. Or on that little intersection there. So there's a few ways you can line this up. You could only do 8 rotations if you wanted to. I think it looks prettier with the 16 in this particular block. Okay, now we have to go this one, which comes off here. And then this one we've already done. So now we're going to go here, and there's a little line right there. Well, let me get my template lined up there. Get my threads out of the way. And yeah, there. I'm like, is that right? Yeah, okay. I picked this thread because it shows up on almost all the colors, right? It shows up on the white, it shows up on the dark gray, it shows up on the red. Um, it doesn't show up on this very light gray over here, but it shows up on all the other colors, so that's why I picked it. You could use a red if you wanted to, or a paler gray, or a darker gray. Even a white you could use if you wanted. Okay, so we're just gonna keep, oh, we already did that one. You don't want to stitch twice. And then this one. By the time you get this done, you'll have done 64 rotations. You'll be a pro. Okay, that one we did. So now we have to go to this one, which is hard to see right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these lines down here, right, that I showed you before. This line right here, I can line up with this reference line here. And then I know that it's in the right spot. So oh, it goes up that way. I'm like, why am I stuck? I forgot the shape of the template. Now here, right, I can't see my line here, but I can see it this way, coming right out from my design from the middle, right? I can see this line right here. So again, I'm going to use the lines down by the foot that are on the fabric and here, and I'm lining up this line here, and that's going to get me this one. So there's that one, and now we have another one that's kind of difficult to see. So again, we're using that angle line on the template and we're moving it to the next reference line here. And that's going to get us this one. And now we can go back to using the reference line that we can see, but we've already stitched that one out, right? So we need to go to the next one, which is right here. You can barely see it, right here. Again, I could use down here, but I can see this one. I should have maybe done it back and forth a little bit more. And then we have to go this next one, right? We were there. So let's check our lines down here and see if we can work that out. And we're going to rotate this way. And I can see, again, there's a line coming out here. So I can line that up. And this line goes right at the intersection of these stitches right here. And that's going to be that one out that way. I think we're getting close to being done. And I am pretty sure that this is our last one. And I can see the reference line right there. So okay, and then the next one would be there, which we've already stitched out. So I have my 16 rotations. You could count them if you wanted to make sure that you didn't miss any, but I can turn this around and see that everything is stitched. And so now I'm going to take a couple of stitches to lock it in there. And pull my bobbin thread. And then I can trim this off. This piece isn't going to get washed and it's not going to be beat up a lot, so I don't need to bury the threads there. And because we stitch so many times in the center, we don't need to bury the center threads. So there's our design. And there you can see it on the back. That shows up really nice back there. It's a lot of texture. And so now we're going to repeat that step in all 4 quadrants. The first thing we are going to do is attach our zipper to our zipper strips. So what I've done is I've folded this in half lengthwise and pressed it. This fold is what's going to be on the zipper. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this first one down and then line up the second one. Now, my zipper is long enough that I can have plenty of room on both sides. So I'm going to sew it so my zipper pull is completely out of the way of my sewing machine. If you have a shorter zipper, what you want to do is have your zipper open part way, sew a little bit, and then move the zipper back at your sewing machine while you're sewing. Well, you stop sewing and then continue on. So, but I have the luxury of being able to do it this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this in place, and you have to be careful because you want to make sure that the fabric is away from the edge of the zipper so that you have room. See how your zipper is, the pull is a little bit wider than your zipper part? So you want to make sure that you leave yourself enough room that you can open the zipper easily. You don't want it to get caught. So I'm going to pin this in place. And then we're going to take it to the machine and sew. You can also use like Wonder Under tape here to hold this down until you get it sewn on. Wonder Under is a double-sided sticky tape. I think that's what it's called. It's about 1/4 of an inch wide. There we go. Now, the one thing that I didn't mention earlier is you want to make sure you're using a polyester zipper and not a metal one, because you're going to have to cut this off on both sides. And you're also going to have to sew over this. So you don't want to sew over metal. Okay? So let's take this to the sewing machine and get this sewn down on this side. I have my zipper foot on my machine, and I have the needle that goes just to the left of the foot, and I'm going to take a couple of back stitches, and now I'm going to go forward. Take the pin out. Oh, I didn't bring the pin cushion over here. And then back stitch a couple stitches and stop. I'm going to check this. Let's see. Yep, it's right along the edge. And now I'm going to try my zipper pull and make sure that it doesn't get caught in the fabric, which it's not. So that's good. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle on the other side of the foot. We're going to see if this will work. Oops. There we go. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to stitch along here. So this is going to put the stitch right about there. So depending on how wide your zipper foot is, what I'm doing is I just want to make sure that when it's in the bag, that this piece of the tape doesn't top up like this. So there we go. And I don't need to back stitch on this, but I'm gonna anyway. And this side. And there you can see that it's stitched down here too. So this part of your zipper tape is not liable to flip up and get caught in your zipper. So that's why I do that. Okay. Now we're going to go and put the other piece of fabric alongside here, making sure that it's even with the top and the bottom. Now, if you had a shorter zipper, what I was talking about is you would sew along here, and then your foot is down and your needle is down. Let's move the needle back over on this side so you can see what I'm talking about. So your needle would be down, right? You would take your zipper pull, you would pull it, and might have to lift your foot to get it to the other side. And now you can continue stitching. So that's if you have like a 14-inch zipper. When you lay your second piece down, you want to make sure that you're even here. So, and again, make sure you have room so the zipper pull doesn't get caught in the fabric. There we go. Let's get this sewn down. So remember to move your needle to the other side of your zipper foot. I'll do a couple of back stitches here and then move forward. Again, before I do that second row of stitching, I want to make sure that my zipper is going to open all the way. And it does. So that's good. I have the fabric in the right location. And now I moved my needle back to the left of the toe, and I'm going to do that second row of stitching along here. So there we go. Our zipper is now ready to sew to our vinyl. We are going to attach the zipper to the top piece of the vinyl, and this is 12.5 inches in this direction, and the 10 inches is the vertical direction. So we're going to flip this over. Now, this may or may not matter to you, but I like to have my zipper pull start on the right-hand side when I open it like this, okay? If you're making this or you're a left-handed person, you can flip it over and do it that way. I have a sister who's left-handed and she gets really excited when I make her bags with the zippers like that. So I'm right-handed, I'm going to do mine like this. So I'm going to flip it right sides together, and I'm going to attach the vinyl to the zipper strip, and also I want to make sure that the paper is there. And I'm using clips because you really can't pin vinyl. This is another place where you could use a Wonder Under tape or some kind of hemming tape or something like that. And this just holds it together. Okay, so I'm just going to check over here. My vinyl's up at the top. If you don't have the tissue paper on the bottom, when you put this on your machine, the vinyl may stick to it. So that's why we leave the tissue paper on. Right, and I think we are ready to go. And we're going to stitch 1/4 inch away on this side. Okay, so let's get that done. Okay, I have switched to my 1/4 inch foot, and we are ready to go. So I'm going to take a couple of back stitches. And then I'm going to go forward. I have found that sewing slow on vinyl works better for me. Making sure we're staying lined up with the vinyl. And then we're going to back stitch a little. There we go. Okay. Then I want to fold this up and I'm going to finger press this because you can't press vinyl. You can with a very, like a medium heat. Okay, now I want to top stitch on there, and I'm not sure my top stitch foot is going to work without getting stuck on the vinyl. There are Teflon feet for machines. I don't happen to have one, so I'm hoping that it doesn't. If it does, I have a trick I can do. So I want to move my needle over a little bit. Let's see. I'm working on a Bernina 8 series machine, and I have to tell the machine what foot I'm using, or it won't let me move the needle back and forth. Okay, I think this is going to work. This just gives it a little bit more finished of a look. Okay, we are ready for the next step. So I have pulled the paper off of my vinyl. This is where you decide if you want your panel to be upright in your bag like this so that you see it through the vinyl, or if you want it like this so that you see this on the back. So that's your choice. I'm going to do mine with the panel facing through the vinyl. Now, I've cut this down to 12.5 inches. And now I'm going to clip, because I don't want to pin my vinyl. I'm going to clip this all the way around. So I'm going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Now, even on the bottom here, I'm going to use the panel as my guide, not the vinyl. And then I'm going to trim that vinyl when I'm done. I'm just going to trim this little strip off right here when I'm done. So now, the other thing you want to do at this point is you want to move your zipper pull to the middle. And when you stitch this, make sure that you kind of hold those together when you get up there to stitch that. So, but you don't want your zipper pull to get on the outside of your bag. And you can trim this now or you can trim it later. I'm going to trim it later after this is stitched. I like it to be secure before I trim that. So there we go. We are ready to sew this. Okay, we have stitched mostly on fabric and now we're stitching on vinyl. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can use a Teflon foot, which has got a plastic coating on it that kind of slides on sticky things. You can take a strip of the tissue paper from before, right, and put it down. You can cut it in strips and sew on top of the tissue paper and then pull that away. Another trick that I found was, I saw someone do this, put Scotch tape on the bottom of your foot. So my tape goes all the way to here on my foot, let's see, to here, and then up to the toes. And then I cut a slit out in here so I can see, and I cut a little tiny slit there for my needle. And my needle did not stick to it. Okay, so we're going to start, get our foot on, and set that. Okay, so we are going to I'm going to do a little back stitching here. Okay, and then we're going to go forward. And we'll see how the Scotch tape works. Don't worry about sewing over this. Oh, the other thing is you want to have a basting stitch for this part. You don't need it to be, I'm going to set it at about 3.5. Okay, so, and we're about to find out if this is going to work. And the Scotch tape is working. So this is a scant 1/4 inch because we're going to put our binding on with a 1/4 inch. I keep dropping things. Let's see. Okay, now we're going to come this way. Again, right, we want to make sure we're sewing on the fabric and not just the vinyl. So I kind of have to move over a little bit. There we go. Now we're coming up to the zipper on this side, and I don't want it to be sewn where it's separated like that. So I'm going to hold it close when I get there. Oops. And slowly sew over that. Perfect. And we don't need to backstitch there because, again, this is just basted on here. So make sure we got the fabric all the way around, which we do. And then here, it's just about a 1/4 inch too big here. So I'm going to take this to the cutting table and I'm going to use a rotary cutter and I'm going to cut this off by putting the ruler right on the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to do that and then we will get ready for our binding. I'm going to sew my 2 pieces of binding together, and I just want to show you what I've done. I've cut off at an angle. I have my pieces both going the same direction, either both right sides up or both right sides down. And I take the bound to fit tool and I just come up here and I butt it up against the fabric and then I trim, and that's how I get the dog ears cut off. So I have my fabric right side up and then the top piece right side down, and I'm aligning these up, and I'm going to pin this. I like to pin this. I used to not pin it, and things didn't always come out the way I wanted them to when I didn't do that. So I just want to make sure that these edges are even. And that's a little off there. So that looks good there. Okay, so now we're just going to sew down here. All right. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away. Well, it's probably a scant, well, it's probably a 1/4 inch. Okay, I don't backstitch here. Okay, check it. Looks good. So now I'm going to take it to the ironing board and get it ready to put on our piece. I'm going to press this to one side. There are a lot of people that press it open, and I like to press mine to one side. So now I have found that if these don't line up properly when you fold this over, that you can, if you flip your seam allowance to the opposite direction, sometimes it makes a difference. So there we go. My iron's not completely hot, but all right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to the far right side, and I have these folds in here from when my fabric was folded, and I'm going to use those folds. And I'm going to fold here like this. And I like to fold it with the fabric facing me. If I fold it with the fabric away, sometimes I'm not sure I can get the edges just right. So I like to fold it towards me. I'm matching up the fold in the fabric, and I just want to get a little press in there. There we go. And now I'm going to press this all the way to the right side. Okay, now I'm just going to keep going. And every time there's a fold in the fabric, I'm going to make sure that my folds meet up. So, I am ready to sew my binding on, and I'm going to sew it to the back, fold it over, and top stitch it down on the front. But as I turn this over, the vinyl is going to stick to my machine bed, and I'm going to have problems sewing. So I'm going to take the tissue. If you have the tissue from the previous step, you can set it down, and we're just going to go around and clip. Since we're sewing on the other side, I'm putting my clips on upside down. And I don't want to get too close to the corners, and that will become more obvious the farther we get along. So now when I set this down on the machine bed, it won't stick. Also, make sure that your zipper's in the middle, right? You don't want it over at the edge where you're going to put your binding, okay? So we have this on here. This should stay. If you're nervous about this, you could tape it down if you wanted. Okay, let's see. We are going to start with our binding. And I want to give myself a generous amount here to close it up. And this is the bottom of the piece. So I am going to start here. What I'm doing, I'm just doing a quick miter. This is going to be done accurately when I sew it down, but all I'm doing is making sure that wherever I've joined my binding strips is not going to hit on a corner. And I actually do this with full-size quilts as well. And here is my seam for my binding, so it's not sitting at a corner. And then this is my last corner. So I don't even have to miter that. I know that that's going to work out fine. I'm going to miter it at the machine. Okay, now I like to give myself indication here that this is where I need to stop. Okay, so I'm going to stop sewing. I'm going to start down here towards the corner. I'm going to come and I'm going to stop right after the corner. And then we'll join. I'll show you how I join these two together. We're still working with our 1/4 inch foot. So I need to unclip that at the corner. I don't want to unclip these pieces because that will take my tissue. And as you can see, it's very smooth at the machine. Okay, so we want to start. I'm taking the things off the corners because they get in my way. We want to start about an inch away from the corner. So about here, we're going to start. I'm going to take a couple of back stitches. And this is a 1/4 of an inch. When we basted, I don't know if I mentioned, we used a scant 1/4 of an inch, but this is a 1/4 of an inch. So what I want to do is I want to stitch so that my needle is a 1/4 inch away from the end. Now you could mark this if you wanted to. When you get down here, you could put a little tick mark there, but I can feel it, the fabric, with my stiletto. I know it's right there. So what I'm going to do is as I get closer to the corner, my foot has a marking here. And so I know when I'm up at this opening right here, right there, I am a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now, if you go too far, that's okay. You don't want to go too short. So I put my stiletto right here on my fabric and go, okay, that's a 1/4 inch from the edge. So I stitch until it reaches that part on my toe, and then I back up about four to six stitches. And then I miter my corner. Now, the reason that I back up about 4 to 6 stitches is in case I have to take the stitches out. So if I've stitched too far, it would be down like this. And then I could just come in here and take a couple stitches out right there, and it would, and then I could fold it back. If you don't go far enough, then this does not fold properly. So you're folding here. So what I do is I bring my binding to the right, and I make sure that this is in line. And then I just finger press right there. I flip this over like that. And then I put a clip over here close to the edge. I turn my piece, and I put my foot down and I lower my needle. I take my piece and I butt this edge up to the needle. And then I start really slowly. By butting your needle, your fabric up to the needle, it ensures that the very first stitch is going to go into the fabric. And then I can take that off. I also want to lower my foot pressure at this point, and then I won't get puckers in my binding. See here, I went a little too far. So I'm going to come in here and just take one stitch out. I'm using gray thread, so. And now there we go. That goes like that. We are now at our last corner, and we want to make sure that we stitch through the corner, and then we're going to stop. There we go. And I'm going to take a couple of back stitches. And we can take our clips off. And now I'm going to take this to the board to show you how I join these. I think it'll be easier than trying to do it at the machine here, but I usually do it at the machine. Okay, I'm going to show you how to join these two pieces. Now, some people go like this and they stitch straight on, and I'm going to show you how to do it where you can stitch at the angle on the piece. So the first thing you want to do is fold back your bottom piece. So this is the bottom because it's attached to the left. So I'm going to say the piece on the left, or I call it the piece on the bottom. And I'm going to fold it back. I want to be kind of in the middle here. I might have to take some stitches out. And I'm just finger pressing that. Now, I take this piece and I want it to be a 1/4 inch away from this piece here. So I'm going to use my spacing gauge. Now, I go with a fat 1/4 inch. And I'm going to put a clip here because I don't want to lose that. Okay, so that's where those two meet up. Now, I'm going to take a pair of scissors. I'm going to go and I'm going to cut right at that fold. The one on the left or the one that's on the bottom. There we go. And I take shears so that I can get a nice clean cut. Okay? Now I take this piece. It doesn't matter what size your binding is, the width of your binding, 3 inches, 1 inch, 2.5, it doesn't matter. This works all the time. So now I'm going to take this piece and I am going to put it in here. Let's turn it this way. I'm going to put it up against the fold. I'm going to come this way. And now this is where I'm going to cut. So you can mark it if you want to. I kind of like to, just it's easier for me to see it. And then same thing, I'm just going to cut straight across like that. Okay? It's the scariest thing ever. So now this piece here on the left, I'm going to open up this way. And I want to draw a diagonal line across here. So I use this piece as a visual, so I know where to draw my line. Now, when I draw my line, I want it to be parallel to the binding. So I want to draw from this corner to this corner. I'm going to get out my ruler. I'm going to go like that. This is my sew line. Straight across there. Okay? Now this is why we left so much room here. And when you have a big quilt, sometimes you want more room. This piece, I'm going to open, and then I'm going to flip it once, okay? So open, just like this one was opened, but then to get right sides together, I have to turn it again. So we're going to turn it again, and then I'm going to take this. Normally what I do is fold this piece and put a clip in it. But let's see if we can. I might have to do that. Okay, this goes like this, and this goes like this. So put our corners together, and I'm going to pin. I pin this a lot. And then I want to pin over here on this side as well. See how that moved? I don't want that. So let's put this back here like that. Let's pin this up here. There. Now we can pin over here. I'm going to pin in the middle here. Like I said, I use a lot of pins here. I tried to do this without pinning and I wasn't very successful. Okay. Now I can clip this way. This gives me room to put this under the needle, and I'm going to sew down this line. All right, here we go. We are ready to sew right on this line. And I do not backstitch here. So now we're going to take these pins out. That's the only one there. And then you can fold it and you can make sure that it fits before you cut your um, excess fabric off. So I've done this so many times, I can just cut it because I know it's going to work. But if you want to check first, that's always a good idea. I'm going to take my shears again, and I'm going to cut 1/4 of an inch to the side of this seam. I do not take this back to the sewing machine or to the ironing board and press it. I just come along here and finger press it. So, okay, now let's see, we stitched down to about here. So we're going to go there, back stitch to lock it, and then you have to come pretty far down. Here we go. And now we're ready to turn this and cut off some straggly threads here. We're going to turn this. First thing we want to do though is take this paper off. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to wrap it around to the front and stitch that down. I've removed the tissue from my piece, and now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm just going to press towards the outside. Now, because there's fabric between my iron and my vinyl, I'm going to be okay. You don't ever want to iron right on vinyl. You always want fabric on top of it, or a pressing cloth, something like that. And you want to use a medium heat. But because we have batting and fabric, I'm using a regular cotton setting. And I go right into the corners, poke them. There we go. Okay. Now, I'm going to take my fabric and my batting, and I am going to miter the corner. Now, what I want to take into consideration, let me come down here, it might be easier to see. If I miter like this, then when my machine comes and I'm stitching along here, it's not going to flip this fabric up. If I do it like this, I run the risk that my stitches are my needle's going to flip that up, and I don't want to do that, okay? So you want to put the right side down first, and then the left, okay? I usually do it like this. So it's the top that comes down first, clip it, and then I'm going to fold this way, and I want this to be a really good corner, so I just manipulate my fabric until it makes a really good corner like that, and then I'm going to clip it in place. I usually clip these about 4 finger widths apart. And now we're going to use our edge stitch foot, which has a blade on it, and we're going to move the needle a couple of positions to the right, and we're going to stitch right along this edge to finish this off. I've got my foot on, and I am lengthening my stitch to up almost a 3. Let's do like a 2.95 or 3, or okay, because this is like a top stitching. So the blade of my foot is right here. I'm putting that up against the edge of the fabric. So again, I always like to start on the bottom. I don't know why. It's because your eye is automatically going to go to the upper left-hand side of your piece. And so if you start on the bottom and you make a mistake when you're starting off, it won't show. So, okay, so here we go. I'm going to take a couple of back stitches, but not a lot, just a couple. I can see through my foot that my needle is going into the fabric, and that's what I want. I go pretty slow on this process. Okay, now before I get too much farther, I just want to check and make sure that everything is stitching, and it is stitching down. And it's right on the edge. That's perfect. Okay, so now when I go into the corner, I have a little corner trick for you. I'm going to hold this down, and I want to make sure that I'm going all the way into the corner. And I want to make sure I'm into the fabric. There we go. Now, I'm going to turn. And my blade is not quite on the fabric, so let's take another stitch. On my machine, if I use the needle up, needle down position, it takes like a half a stitch, which is perfect. Okay, now, if I were to go right now, I run the risk of my stitches not being exactly in the corner. Kind of think of it when you do ruler work, you take that extra stitch on a point. So what I do is I have a feature on my machine that I can go to the beginning of a stitch sequence. That will make the needle go up and down in the same place, one stitch. You can also lower your feed dogs, take one stitch, or lower your stitch length to 0 and take one stitch. All 3 of those options work. So watch, it's going to take a stitch, and now it's going to move. There we go. We're coming up to the beginning here. So I'm going to go a few stitches beyond where I started, which is right here. Take a couple of back stitches, and we are done. Here is the finished project bag. This is the front where we have the ruler work that you can see through the vinyl, and then this is the back. So you can do any fabric you want on the back, make it stand out more, but there's that. Zipper works, goes all the way. And you could fit crosshairs in here. You could put your blocks that you're working on in here. You could put templates in here. But this is a project bag with a clear cover. So